The Frankfurt deal was finally closed. 6 grueling days of negotiations, and I'd secured the European expansion my boss had been chasing for 2 years. My body ached from the 9-hour flight, but triumph pulsed through me as I steered my rental car toward my parents' suburban home. My suitcase waited in the trunk. I'd promised Mom I'd stop by before heading to my apartment, knowing she'd want to hear about my trip and probably force-feed me something homemade. The setting sun painted the familiar neighborhood in amber hues as I turned onto Maple Street. I pulled into the driveway, noticing Dad had finally trimmed the overgrown bushes flanking the garage. Little victories. My black pumps pinched as I stepped out, smoothing my charcoal pencil skirt. The flight had wrinkled my silk blouse, but I still looked every inch the senior financial analyst who'd just landed a career-making deal. I smiled, fishing the garage remote from my purse. I'd stored my Challenger here while traveling, safer than street parking at my apartment complex. The familiar click as I pressed the button, the mechanical whir as the door lifted. Then nothing but empty space where my car should be. No, no, no. The words tumbled out as my stomach plummeted. The garage stretched before me, barren except for Dad's lawnmower and Mom's gardening supplies. My fingers went numb. The remote clattered to the concrete as I dropped my suitcase and rushed toward the house. This couldn't be happening. Not my car, not my Challenger. I burst through the side door into the kitchen. They were waiting for me, Mom, Dad, and my sister Kendra seated around the oak table like they were staging an intervention. The silence hit me first, then the guilt radiating from each of them. Dad couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at his calloused hands spread flat on the table. Avery, honey. Mom's voice carried that sugary tone she used when breaking bad news. Don't overreact. Where's my car? The words scraped my throat. Kendra straightened her shoulders, confidence plastered on her face like one of her makeup tutorials. It's just temporary, Av. I'll pay it all back. Pay what back? My voice dropped dangerously low. Where is my Challenger? Mom glanced at Dad, who still wouldn't look up. We had to make a tough decision, sweetie. Kendra needed startup capital for her business, and we took it to Cornerstone Pawn. Dad finally spoke, his voice rough. Got $45,000 for it. The room tilted sideways. You did what with my car? It's a loan against the car, not a sale. Kendra jumped in. Once my cosmetics line launches, I'll pay it back with interest. You'll have your car back in no time. My mind flashed to the endless nights I'd spent hunched over spreadsheets at Bridgewater Capital. 70-hour weeks for 6 years straight. Saying no to vacations, to a better apartment, to everything while I saved. I remembered Grandpa's weathered hands guiding mine over the engine of his friend's Challenger when I was 9. These machines aren't just transportation, Avery girl. They're dreams made solid. His eyes had crinkled with absolute certainty. Someday you'll have your own beauty. Just be patient. The day I'd finally driven my Challenger home, tears had streamed down my face. Not just for the glossy black paint or the rumble of the engine, but for what it represented. Proof that my sacrifices meant something. My cosmetics startup is revolutionary, Kendra was saying, flipping her hair over her shoulder. I've developed a formula that, I don't care if you've discovered the fountain of youth in a bottle. My voice cut through her pitch. That car wasn't yours to take. Mom's lips thinned. Now Avery, family helps family. You make plenty of money at your job. Kendra needs this chance to succeed. So you used my spare key? And my title? The betrayal burrowed deeper with each realization. You committed fraud. Dad flinched. We're your parents, Mom countered. We've always supported both our girls equally. A bitter laugh escaped me. Equally? That's what you call this? My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out automatically, glancing at the notification. My insurance company alerting me to a lien placed against my vehicle. Ice replaced the fire in my veins. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't even just about my dream car. This was about respect, something my family had never given me. You have 30 days, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. 30 days to get my car back, or I'm pressing charges for fraud and theft. Charges? Mom gasped. Against your own family? Family doesn't steal from each other. I turned toward the door. 30 days. Their shocked expressions followed me as I walked out, slamming the door with enough force to rattle the family photos on the wall. Photos that suddenly seemed like fiction, smiling faces hiding the truth that in this family, my dreams had always been considered disposable. The pawn shop reeks of desperation and cheap air freshener. I straighten my blazer, trying to look like a woman who belongs here rather than one whose world is collapsing. My reflection in a dusty display case shows mascara tracks I missed washing away this morning. Miss Martin. The pawnbroker Gordon, according to his name tag, slides paperwork across the counter. His voice carries the practiced neutrality of someone who witnesses financial catastrophes daily. Your vehicle was brought in 5 days ago. Loan amount $45,000, plus our standard fees. I scan the documents, my finance training kicking in automatically. $3,000 in fees? That's practically predatory. 5. Gordon's face remains impassive. Classic car market's volatile. We take risks. And if the loan isn't repaid? After 35 days, we auction the vehicle. He taps a paragraph of fine print. Full payment required by October 3rd. $48,000 total. My stomach twists as I flip to the next page. There it is, my signature. Except it isn't mine. The forgery is close enough to fool the pawn shop but misses the slight upward curve I always make on the final N. This isn't my signature. Gordon's expression shifts slightly. Ma'am, if you're suggesting fraud, I'm not suggesting, I'm stating. I pull out my driver's license, then a recent work contract. Compare them. He studies the signatures, discomfort growing visible. I'll need to speak with my manager about this. Please do. And while you're at it, pull the security footage from when this transaction happened. My voice sounds calmer than I feel. I was in Frankfurt, Germany. 20 minutes and one manager later, the reality settles like concrete in my chest. My parents committed actual fraud, criminal fraud. The kind people go to jail for. We can file a police report right now, the manager offers. The word police makes my throat close. I need time to think. Back in my apartment, I sink onto the couch, still wearing my coat. On the coffee table sits a family photo album I haven't opened in years. I pull it onto my lap, fingers trembling slightly as I flip through plastic-covered memories. There's Kendra's sweet 16, a garden party with 40 guests, a professional photographer, and a cake taller than she was. I turn the page to find nothing from my 16th birthday, because I'd been working a part-time job at the mall, saving for college application fees. I flip forward. Kendra's high school graduation, where Dad rented a limousine. My college graduation ceremony, empty chairs where my parents should have been. Their flight mysteriously canceled despite clear weather. They'd made it to Kendra's dance recital the very next day. Christmas 2018 stares back at me, Kendra standing beside a red Volkswagen with an enormous bow, while I clutch a department store sweater to my chest, smiling that tight smile that doesn't reach my eyes. The pattern stretches across years, across milestones, across dreams, not just subtle favoritism, but consistent sacrifices, my sacrifices to elevate Kendra. My phone rings, startling me. Uncle Harvey's name lights up the screen. I just heard, he says, skipping hello. Your mother called, trying to spin it their way. And what way is that? I ask, suddenly exhausted. That you're overreacting. That family helps family. His disgusted snort carries through the phone. This isn't right, and you know it. I do know it. Tears threaten again. I just didn't think they'd go this far. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. After we hang up, Aunt Patricia calls Dad's sister, always the peacemaker. They were just trying to help Kendra succeed. She pleads. Gerald feels terrible. Can't you find some compassion? The doorbell saves me from answering. It's Jessica from work, holding a bag from our favorite Thai place. I brought dinner, she says, taking in my red-rimmed eyes. You look like hell. I laugh for the first time in days. Thanks for the honesty. Over spicy noodles, I tell her everything. Her outrage feels like a balm, someone finally seeing the situation clearly. You know this is criminal, right? She asks, refilling my wine glass. They stole your car. I know. If anyone else did this. But it wasn't anyone else. I set down my fork. It was my family. That makes it worse, not better. Jessica's voice softens. What does your boss say? That family can cut deeper than anyone. I'd broken down in his office earlier, something I'd never done in 6 years at Bridgewater. He's giving me space to handle it. The next morning I text Kendra. Coffee. Noon. The place near your apartment. Just us. She's already there when I arrive, wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy day. Her bouncy confidence from the kitchen confrontation has evaporated. Let me see the business plan, I say, sitting down. What? The business plan. Financial projections, marketing strategy. You know, The documents any legitimate startup would have before seeking investment. She fidgets with her coffee cup. It's more fluid than that. Creative businesses. Stop. I hold up my hand. Show me what you have. Actual documents. What she pulls from her bag is pathetic. A mood board of makeup looks, a list of potential product names, and crude sketches of packaging. No supplier contracts, no formulation specifics, no financial modeling. This is it? My voice drops dangerously low. This is what you stole my car for? Plays now. I just needed a chance to prove myself like you did. Her lower lip trembles. Everyone always talks about how successful you are, how responsible, how I should be more like you. I earned my chance, I say, each word deliberate. I didn't steal someone else's dream. Her shoulders slump. I thought once the business took off, I could pay you back with interest, make everyone proud. And now? The first shipment arrived yesterday. She removes her sunglasses, revealing puffy eyes. Half the containers were cracked. Customers are already complaining online. The formula separates after a few hours. Her voice cracks. Everything's falling apart. My phone buzzes with a text. From Kendra. I look up at her, confused, then back at my phone. I need more money to fix this. Just a little more. Please, Avery, I'm desperate. She's watching me read it, her expression pleading. I set my phone face down on the table. Not a penny more, I say. You fix this, or we all lose. Her face crumples. I don't know how. For one dangerous moment, I feel the old pull, the family expectation that I'll clean up the mess, fix the problem, be the responsible one. Then I remember my empty garage and the forged signature. You better figure it out fast, I say, standing up. The clock is ticking. 10 days after the garage revelation, Kendra's business lies in ruins. I track her spectacular failure while trying to focus on my own career, watching each disastrous update ping my phone like clockwork. Day 3. Suppliers refusing further shipments after bounced payments. Day 5. Refund demands flooding her social media. Day 7. Business account frozen by the bank. Day 10. Kendra barricaded in her apartment, ignoring everyone's calls. I stare at my computer screen in my office at Bridgewater Capital, the Frankfurt acquisition documents blurring before my eyes. The deal I'd spent 6 months orchestrating now hangs by a thread because I can't focus. My mind keeps circling back to the empty space in the garage where my challenger should be. My desk phone rings. It's my boss, Director Palmer. Avery, I need those final projections by 4. His voice carries that edge of concern that's been growing over the past week. You look exhausted. Everything okay at home? I force a professional smile into my voice. Everything's fine. You'll have those projections within the hour. The lie tastes bitter. Nothing is fine. My family betrayed me. My sister's business is imploding. And my career might follow if I can't compartmentalize better. When Sunday arrives, I park my rental at the curb outside my parents' house instead of in the driveway. A small rebellion, but it feels necessary. The familiar smell of pot roast Mom's peace offering wafts from the kitchen as I enter. Dad sits at the table, shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. Mom fusses with the china plates, the good ones reserved for Christmas and crises. Kendra arrives late, her designer sunglasses hiding puffy eyes, her confident stride replaced by something slower, smaller. Let's eat while it's hot, Mom says, serving Dad first as she always has. We sit in silence, broken only by the scrape of forks against plates. I cut my meat into precise squares, focusing on the pressure of knife against ceramic to keep from screaming. Mom breaks first. Kendra's having a difficult time with her business. She pats Kendra's hand. Everyone fails sometimes. I set down my fork. This isn't about failure. It's about theft. We thought we were helping, Dad says quietly, the first words he's spoken since I arrived. His weathered hands tremble slightly as he reaches for his water glass. We wanted Kendra to have her chance. At my expense, the words come out sharper than intended, slicing through the pretense. You didn't just take a car, you took everything it represented. Kendra flinches. Honey, it's just a vehicle, Mom begins. It was 6 years of overtime and missed vacations. It was Grandpa's legacy. It was the one thing I had that proved all my sacrifices meant something. My voice remains steady while something wild and wounded thrashes inside my chest. And you took it without a second thought. The doorbell rings. Relief floods Mom's face at the interruption until Dad returns with Uncle Harvey behind him. My father's older brother fills the doorway with his broad shoulders and trademark scowl. "What the hell were you thinking, Gerald?" Harvey demands without preamble. His eyes find mine across the room. "Avery called me." Mom's spine stiffens. "This is a family matter, Harvey." "Exactly why I'm here." He pulls out the chair beside me. "Someone needs to speak for the member of this family you're throwing under the bus." Dad's face reddens. "Now wait just a minute." "No, you wait." I reach for my briefcase beside the chair. The leather feels cool against my fingertips as I extract the folder I prepared yesterday. "We need to talk about what happens next." I place 3 printouts on the table: vehicle title, fraud statutes, pawnshop regulations, and sentencing guidelines. The papers land with the weight of grenades. "This is a felony." I tap the first document. "I could send you both to jail. Anyway." Mom's face drains of color. "You wouldn't." "I don't want to." The truth of this surprises me. Despite everything, I don't want to destroy them. "But you need to understand what you've done." Dad stares at the papers, really seeing them. "Prison time?" 2 to 5 years for title fraud. I keep my voice clinical detached, plus restitution. Mom collapses into tears, not the manipulative kind she uses to end arguments, but ragged, ugly sobs that shake her shoulders. Dad reaches for her hand, his own eyes glistening. "What have we done to you? To us?" For the first time since this nightmare began, I see genuine remorse in his face. Not just regret for getting caught, but true understanding of the damage inflicted. Kendra pulls off her sunglasses, revealing red-rimmed eyes. "This is my fault." Her voice cracks. "I pushed them to do it. I knew you'd never agree. So I convinced them it was temporary, that you'd understand once my business took off." She looks down at her manicured hands. "I never thought it would fall apart so fast." Uncle Harvey leans forward. "So what's the plan? Because that pawn shop won't wait forever." 25 days, I confirm. Then they auction the car. Mom dabs at her eyes. "What can we do?" I pull out a calculator. "We need to figure out what resources we have." For the next hour, we assess our options. Dad thinks they can get a home equity line of credit for $30,000, but it will take 2 weeks to process. Kendra agrees to sell her BMW and empty her savings account, which might yield another $12,000. I reluctantly commit $6,000 from my emergency fund. Uncle Harvey watches this accounting with narrowed eyes. "I can loan you $5,000, he finally says, "but only because Avery shouldn't have to pay for this mess." The math is brutal. Even pooling everything, we're looking at 15 days before we can gather the full amount. And the pawn shop requires an immediate deposit of $15,000 to halt the auction process. "I'll call tomorrow morning," Dad says, his voice steadier now. "See if they'll work with us on the timeline." When I leave, the weight on my chest hasn't lifted, but something has shifted. The betrayal remains, but now there's a path forward, difficult, uncertain, but visible. Back in my apartment, I sit on the edge of my bed, a framed photo in my hands. My grandfather stands beside a gleaming black Challenger, his arm around 12-year-old me. The summer light catches on the chrome bumper and in his smiling eyes. "Cars are just metal and chrome, Avery girl," he told me once. "It's what they represent that matters." In the stillness of my apartment, I finally understand what he meant. This fight isn't just about getting my car back. It's about demanding the respect I've earned. It's about teaching my family that my dreams matter as much as Kendra's. I pick up my phone and dial my parents' number. Dad answers on the first ring. "I'll help," I tell him, my voice steady. "But things will never be the same." The silence stretches between us, filled with everything we can't undo. "I know," he finally says. "We'll make this right, Avery. I promise." I end the call without saying goodbye. Some promises come too late to be comforting, but I'll take action over words any day. Tomorrow, we start the fight to reclaim what's mine, not just a car, but my place in this family. Kendra stares at her reflection in the boutique's mirrored wall, fingering the delicate silk of her favorite Hermes scarf. Her collection, once her pride, now laid across the counter for appraisal. The shop owner studies each piece through narrow glasses, her lips pursed in calculation. "I can offer $8,000 for the lot," she says, not looking up. Kendra swallows hard. These pieces cost her over $15,000. But the pawnshop's deadline looms larger than her pride. "Done," she whispers, watching as the woman writes the check. Across town, Dad shuffles into the warehouse manager's office, arthritis flaring in his knees. Night shift? The manager raises his eyebrows. Gerald, you haven't worked nights in 20 years. Dad sinks into the chair across from him. Just temporarily. Need the differential pay. The manager studies the shadows under Dad's eyes. This about that car situation your brother mentioned? Dad nods once, jaw tight. Family business. Starting Monday, then. He slides the paperwork across. Hope it's worth it. At home, Mom wraps Grandma's silver candlesticks in tissue paper, hands trembling. These pieces survived the Depression, witnessed 50 years of family celebrations. She places them carefully in a box with the pearl necklace Dad gave her on their 25th anniversary. The pawnbroker at Fletcher's barely glances at the items before offering $3,000, barely enough to cover next week's interest payment. My own sacrifices come in lost sleep and skipped meals. The Frankfurt expansion demands constant attention, but I'm taking extra accounts, pushing for the performance bonus that suddenly means the difference between redemption and ruin. The deposit receipt from Cornerstone Pawn sits on my desk, proof that our initial $15,000 postponed the auction. A small victory, hollowed by the bank's latest letter. HELOC approval delayed pending property assessment. They're making actual progress, Jessica says over takeout in my cubicle. Your sister called me. I look up from spreadsheets, surprised. She called you? Wanted to know if the financial group was hiring for entry-level positions. Jessica twirls noodles around her fork. I was shocked. Later that week, I spot Kendra across the food court, barely recognizable in simple black slacks and a white button-down. No designer labels, no statement jewelry. She shifts her weight nervously outside Nordstrom's employee entrance. Her first day. When my phone rings that night, her voice sounds smaller than I've ever heard it. I had no idea of, her words catch. 8 hours on my feet, smiling at people who treat me like furniture. And you've been working 70-hour weeks for years. I lean against my kitchen counter, unsure what to say. All those times I called you boring for canceling plans, she continues. You weren't being boring. You were being responsible. 3 days later, we meet at the coffee shop halfway between our apartments. Kendra orders plain coffee instead of her usual complicated concoction. Her makeup is subtle, her nails short and unpolished. I was entitled and selfish, she says without preamble. I'm so sorry, Avery. Not just for the car, for everything. I wrap my hands around my mug, feeling the warmth seep into my palms. Pretty words, Ken. I know. She nods, eyes steady. Actions speak louder. I'm trying to show you now. At my parents' house, Dad spreads bank statements across the kitchen table, the harsh overhead light emphasizing every line on his face. He squints at figures that refuse to balance, adding columns for the 5th time. Gerald. Mom calls from the study. Did you know about these? She holds a stack of loan applications, all in Kendra's flowing script. Credit cards, personal loans. 3 different buy now pay later accounts. Nearly $80,000, Mom whispers. We had no idea. The next morning, they sit across from Mr. Winters at the credit union, the financial advisor they've trusted for 20 years. This HELOC will delay your retirement by at least 5 years, he explains gently. And that's assuming no other financial surprises. Mom stares at her hands, wedding ring loose on her thinner finger. When I stop by to drop off my portion of this week's payment, Dad meets me on the porch steps. For once, Mom isn't hovering nearby with excuses. We failed you, he says, voice rough with emotion, long before we took your car. I sit beside him, the weathered wood creaking beneath us. All those years, we praised Kendra's dreams while dismissing yours. His calloused hands twist together. You never asked for much, so we never thought you needed much. The Sunday evening sky turns golden as we sit in silence. Then the HELOC finally comes through, but with a 3-day processing period. Relief turns to panic when Cornerstone Pawn calls. Another buyer is interested in the Challenger, offering cash. We just need 2 more days. Dad pleads over the phone. Business is business, the pawnbroker replies. First money here gets the car. The next 36 hours blur into frantic calculations and desperate phone calls. Kendra empties her savings account. Mom sells her anniversary diamond earrings. I max out my emergency credit line. Still $3,000 short. It's not enough, Mom says, voice hollow as we gather around the kitchen table. The deadline is tomorrow at noon. The doorbell rings, and Uncle Harvey stands on the porch, checkbook in hand. Family helps family, he says, echoing Mom's words from weeks ago, but with entirely different meaning. The next morning, we all crowd into the bank, watching the digital clock tick toward noon as the manager processes the wire transfer. Dad's hand trembles as he signs the authorization. At 11:42, the confirmation appears on the screen. Payment received. For the first time in weeks, we breathe. The early morning sun catches on the chrome trim of my Challenger as I stand in front of Cornerstone Pawn, gripping the receipt in my sweaty palm. After 30 days of family sacrifices, arguments, and enough tears to fill the Colorado River, we've scraped together the $48,000. Every penny accounted for. My throat tightens as I push through the glass door. The same pawnbroker who took my car sits behind the counter, eyebrows lifting in recognition. "Miss Martin," he says, sliding paperwork across the counter. "Here for your vehicle." I nod, unable to trust my voice. My signature feels foreign as I scrawl it across each line, the pen trembling between my fingers. The broker counts the cashier's check twice before sliding over a folder containing my title and a set of keys. "All square," he says, but I barely hear him. My hands shake so badly I nearly drop the keys. Cold metal against my palm, the familiar weight I'd thought I might never feel again. Standing in the lot, I trace my fingers along the glossy black paint, feeling for imperfections, for evidence of mistreatment. The chrome trim catches sunlight, sending it back in blinding flashes. "They detailed it yesterday," the broker mentions from behind me. "Policy before return." I don't answer. This moment should feel triumphant. Instead, it tastes like ash victory hollowed out by betrayal. Grandpa's voice echoes in my memory. "Cars are just metal and chrome. It's what they represent that matters." What does this car represent now? Not just my hard work and sacrifice, but the knowledge that my family saw my dream as disposable. The engine rumbles to life with a familiar growl that vibrates through the seat. Tears stream unchecked down my face as I pull away from the pawn shop, each mile between us allowing another fragment of emotion to break loose. By the time I reach my apartment, my cheeks are soaked, mascara probably tracking dark rivers down my face, but my car is home. 3 days later, my phone buzzes with a text from Mom. "Sunday dinner? 5 p.m. Your father's grilling steaks. Cute donde." The invitation lands like a stone in my stomach. I consider declining but type back a simple, "I'll be there," instead. Some conversations can't happen over text. Sunday arrives with perfect spring weather. The Challenger's engine announces my arrival before I even turn into their driveway. Dad stands by the grill, spatula frozen mid-flip as I park. Mom appears in the doorway, worrying a dish towel between her hands. Dinner is an exercise in awkward silence, punctuated by requests to pass the potatoes or comment on the weather. Kendra picks at her food, eyes downcast. Nobody mentions the elephant sitting at the table with us. Finally, Dad clears his throat, setting down his fork with deliberate care. "Avery?" he begins, voice formal as a stranger's. "I've prepared some things I'd like to say." He pulls a folded paper from his pocket, hands visibly trembling. "I betrayed your trust. I violated your property rights. I failed in my duty as your father to protect what matters to you." Each sentence sounds rehearsed but sincere, his eyes darting between the paper and my face. Mom reaches across the table, tears spilling. "Please forgive us, sweetheart. We were wrong. So terribly wrong." Kendra straightens in her chair. "I've been working at Macy's for 3 weeks now," she says, pulling out a small notebook. "I've created a budget plan to pay back my portion. It'll take time, but every penny will be returned." They watch me, 3 faces tight with hope and fear. "Healing takes time," I say finally, setting my napkin beside my plate. "Trust isn't rebuilt overnight." The relief in the room is palpable, though no one smiles. They understand this isn't forgiveness, just the willingness to try. 2 days later, I sit across from Rachel Holman, the lawyer whose card has been burning a hole in my wallet for a month. "You have a solid case for criminal charges," she says, glasses perched on her nose as she reviews the documentation. "Title fraud, identity theft. Your parents could face serious consequences." I stare at the family photo on her desk, 3 generations smiling in matching sweaters. "What are my other options?" Rachel leans back. "A formal repayment agreement, legally binding, but without criminal charges." The next Sunday, We gather around the dining room table again. Uncle Harvey sits beside me, his weathered hands steady as he watches my parents and Kendra sign the contracts. Monthly payments for 2 years. I explain, voice steadier than I feel. With interest. Dad's hand shakes as he signs, but his eyes meet mine without flinching. We'll honor this, Avery. Every term. The power shift is unmistakable. For the first time in my life, my boundaries aren't just words to be dismissed. They're in black and white, legally binding. I never wanted this kind of authority over you. I admit later, as Harvey walks me to my car, sometimes respect has to be enforced before it can be freely given, he replies, squeezing my shoulder. The extended family reunion the following month becomes the stage for public reckoning. Aunt Patricia corners me by the potato salad, wine glass tilting dangerously. Everyone makes mistakes, dear. You've made your point. Time to let it go. Uncle Harvey materializes beside us, steady as an oak. They need to own what they did, Patricia. No minimizing. The backyard falls silent as Kendra steps forward, shoulders squared despite her trembling voice. I manipulated my parents, she announces to the gathered family. I played on their favoritism, but they chose to betray Avery. We're all accountable. Aunt Patricia's mouth opens and closes like a fish. Cousin Mike gives me a solemn nod of respect. Something shifts in the family dynamic, truth cutting through decades of enabling patterns. Later that week, I changed the garage door code at my parents' house. The symbolism isn't lost on any of us as I install a security system on the Challenger, the small black box blinking beneath the dashboard. Will you leave a spare key with us? Mom asks as I prepare to leave. Just in case of emergency? I meet her eyes, holding her gaze until understanding dawns. No, I say simply. I won't. She nods, lips pressed together but accepting. The message requires no further explanation. Some boundaries need no words, just the clear, unmistakable sound of a line being drawn. The mountain curves ahead unfold like a beckoning hand. I downshift, feeling the Challenger respond with a rumble that vibrates through the steering wheel and into my bones. The Colorado Rockies rise around me, painted in morning gold. 1 year since I nearly lost her, and driving still feels like coming home. You were right, Grandpa, I whisper, patting the dashboard. The black paint gleams in the sunlight, every reflection a reminder of what I fought for. The windows down, mountain air rushing through my hair, I can finally enjoy this dream without the shadow of betrayal. My shoulders no longer hitch toward my ears in constant tension. The knot that lived between my shoulder blades for months has finally dissolved. Last week's dinner at my parents' house plays in my mind. Dad led me to the garage before I left, unveiling the small addition he'd built himself, a secure, locked space with its own separate alarm system. Your car's always safe here now, he'd said, voice gruff with emotion he still struggles to express. Only you have the code. Mom has learned to ask now. Simple things like, would you mind if I borrow your jacket? The questions themselves are small victories, acknowledgments that my belongings aren't community property. Kendra sends me $300 each month. Not much against what she owes, but the consistency matters more than the amount. Her apartment is tiny, her wardrobe simple. Last month she showed me her new budget spreadsheet, pride replacing the desperate need for approval that once drove her. I'm learning what you knew all along, she'd admitted. Earning something feels different than being handed it. A sharp curve approaches and I ease off the gas, then accelerate through the turn. The engine sings beneath me. Uncle Harvey rode with me last weekend, his weathered hand patting the dashboard appreciatively. Your grandfather would be proud, he'd said, not just of the car, but of the woman you've become. I signal and pull into the mountain overlook. Below, the valley stretches into forever, trees spilling toward distant peaks. I kill the engine and sit in the quiet, remembering the day I placed fresh flowers at Grandpa's grave, propping a framed photo of me with the Challenger against his headstone. I understand now, I'd told him. Some dreams cost more than money. The finance class I volunteer with meets tomorrow. 20 young women learning what no one taught me: how to protect what matters, how to establish boundaries, how to recognize when giving becomes harmful. Last month, a teenager named Melissa lingered after class, admiring the Challenger. My dad used to work on old cars, she'd said. Before the divorce, my mom sold his tools to pay for my sister's dance lessons. I'd let her sit behind the wheel, watching her eyes light up with possibility. Dreams need protecting, I told her, echoing Grandpa's wisdom but with new understanding. And so do you. The sun warms my face as I start the engine again. The road curves ahead, possibilities unmarked by guilt or obligation. Boundaries have cost me the fantasy of perfect family harmony, but they've given me something better: authentic relationships built on respect rather than expectation. I accelerate back onto the mountain road, windows down, the future unfolding before me like the perfect stretch of open highway. For the first time since I was 9 years old, watching Grandpa's hands on a stranger's car, I'm truly enjoying my dream. The ticking of Attorney Wallace's mahogany desk clock feels like a hammer against my skull. Each second pounds another nail into the coffin of what I thought my life was. I sit alone in the leather chair that's too firm to offer any comfort, my fingernails pressing half-moons into my palms. "I'll read the relevant section again, Miss Cantwell." Wallace clears his throat, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose like a bird ready to take flight. "To our daughter Hallie, we leave our entire estate, including the family home at 1423 Maple Street, all financial accounts, and personal property therein." My lips part, but no sound emerges. 3 weeks. Just 3 weeks since I watched them lower my parents into the ground. 3 weeks of comforting Hallie, arranging the memorial service, sorting through condolence cards, and fielding casseroles from neighbors who murmured how brave I was being. And to Nerisse? I finally manage my voice, a stranger's moniker. Wallace slides a sealed envelope across the desk. "They left this for you." My hands tremble as I break the seal, the paper vibrating like autumn leaves in a storm. My mother's handwriting flows across the page in familiar blue ink. "You've always been strong. She needs this more. You're already stable. Please, one last act of sacrifice." I look up, vision blurring. "I don't understand. I raised her. I was there when they weren't." Wallace shuffles papers, avoiding my eyes. The room tilts sideways as a memory floods in uninvited. Me at 14, dragging myself from bed at 3 a.m. to the sound of Hallie's hungry cries. The bottles I warmed while my parents worked night shifts at the hospital. The schoolwork pushed aside because, "You're so good with her, Nerisse. She needs you more than school does right now." College applications completed but never mailed because Hallie had separation anxiety. Scholarship opportunities dissolving like sugar in rain. My parents' grateful smiles as I deferred my education year after year, becoming the stable foundation they could build their careers upon. "Your parents felt very strongly about this arrangement," Wallace says, tapping his pen against a document requiring my signature. "They thought you'd understand." I rise from the chair, my legs wooden, but my spine suddenly steel. The clock continues its relentless ticking, counting down the seconds of a life I no longer recognize. "I've understood enough," I say, my voice steadier than the hands I clasp together to hide their shaking. A single tear escapes down my cheek, but I don't brush it away. Let him see it. Let him remember it. I'll need some time. Wallace stands, extending the papers. "We should complete the acknowledgement today, if possible." I look at the forms, at the letter, with its cruel request for one last sacrifice, at the pen, waiting for me to once again be the good daughter who puts everyone else first. I turn and walk toward the door. "Miss Cantwell, you've forgotten the letter." Wallace calls after me. "No," I say without turning back. "I haven't forgotten anything." The evening brings 6 calls from Hallie. Each time, my phone vibrates against the coffee table in Sandra's apartment where I've temporarily landed. Each time, I watch her name flash on the screen until it goes dark again. I sit cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by the pitiful collection of belongings I gathered from my bedroom at my parents' house, the house where I've lived my entire 30 years. The house I no longer have any right to enter without permission. My laptop, 3 changes of clothes, a photo album from before Hallie, my grandmother's recipe box. Nothing else seemed truly mine. They made me her mother. Then they erased me. The thought comes unbidden, sharp as broken glass. I press my palms against my eyes until colors explode behind my eyelids. Practical concerns press in. I have 2 weeks' worth of savings. The grocery store where I work part-time won't cover rent anywhere in this town. Sandra's hospitality has an expiration date. Her boyfriend moves in next month. I open the small suitcase I borrowed from Sandra and begin folding the clothes I brought, though there's no real need for such care. My fingers brush against the hard edge of a picture frame at the bottom. I lifted out a snapshot from Hallie's 10th birthday. She's blowing out candles on a cake I baked at dawn before my shift, her face turned slightly toward me, not the camera. My arm is around her shoulders, and we're both laughing. I trace the outline of our faces, then tuck only this photo into my purse. The rest of the family pictures remain in the suitcase. In the kitchen, Sandra opens a bottle of wine. "You can stay as long as you need," she lies kindly. I nod, knowing I'll be gone before she has to ask. A week passes like water through cupped hands. I return to the house no longer my home to collect the few remaining items I'd left behind. The key feels foreign in my grip as I unlock the front door, half expecting someone to stop me, to tell me I no longer belong. The house breathes silence. Hallie is at school, and I'm grateful for the empty rooms, as I make my way upstairs to gather the last of my belongings. In my old bedroom, I pull open the closet door and reach for a box of winter clothes on the top shelf. My fingers brush against something else, a thick manila envelope wedged against the wall. Curious, I tug it free, sending a spray of dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. The envelope is unmarked, sealed with a faded rubber band. Inside, I find a stack of letters, their corners softened with age. The first bears the emblem of State University, my dream school. I slide my finger beneath the flap, heart suddenly racing. "Dear Miss Cantwell, we are pleased to offer you admission to our undergraduate program with a full academic scholarship." The date, 8 years ago. My legs give way and I sink to the floor, letters scattered around me like fallen leaves. Another envelope from Westridge College. A third from Lakeside Arts Institute. All with the same message: acceptance, scholarships, opportunities. All unopened until this moment. Between the pages of one letter, I find a yellow sticky note in my mother's handwriting. "Hallie's too young to be without you." The air vanishes from my lungs as though I've been struck. I press my hand against my chest, feeling the violent thud of my heart against my palm. They knew. They intercepted my acceptance letters, deliberately keeping me from my future, ensuring I'd remain their unpaid caregiver. I sit motionless, dust particles swirling around me in the shaft of sunlight, the physical evidence of their betrayal warming in my trembling hands. 3 days later, I'm scanning groceries at Miller's Market, the steady beep of the scanner matching the dull rhythm of my thoughts. 8 hours into a 10-hour shift, my feet throb in shoes not designed for concrete floors. "Paper or plastic?" I ask without looking up. "Nerys?" My head snaps up at the sound of Hallie's voice. She stands on the other side of the register, a small basket of items clutched in her hands. Her eyes are puffy, dark circles beneath them that mirror my own. "Why did you move out?" she asks, her voice small. "Why aren't you answering my calls?" I glance at Mr. Miller hovering near the customer service desk, his eyes fixed on our exchange. I can't afford to make a scene, can't risk this job that barely keeps me afloat. "Next customer, please," I say mechanically, reaching for the first item in her basket. "Talk to me," Hallie pleads as I scan a box of cereal. "I don't understand what's happening." "I'm just respecting Mom and Dad's wishes." The words taste bitter on my tongue. "But they told me." Her voice cracks. "They said you'd always take care of me." I pause, a can of soup suspended between us. "They said you promised to stay with me until I finished college." Tears spill down her cheeks. "Was that a lie?" The scanner beeps, shattering the moment. I finish ringing up her items, aware of Mr. Miller's watchful gaze, of the customers shifting impatiently behind Hallie. "That'll be $27.58, I say, avoiding her eyes. At night, I lie awake on Sandra's couch, staring at the ceiling. 2 more weeks before her boyfriend moves in, and I need to be gone. My paycheck barely covers food and bus fare, with nothing left for deposits on an apartment. What little savings I had went to my portion of our parents' funeral expenses. I insisted on sharing despite Attorney Wallace's suggestion that the estate could cover everything. Tomorrow is payday, but after rent to Sandra I'll have $212 to my name. Not enough for first and last month's rent anywhere, not even in the shabby apartments on the east side of town. I roll onto my side, pulling the thin blanket tighter around my shoulders. The apartment goes quiet after Sandra turns off her television, leaving me alone with thoughts that circle like hungry wolves. The discovered scholarship letters taunt me from my backpack. Education paths permanently altered, dreams deferred until they withered. Years spent raising someone else's child instead of building my own life have left me with a fragmented work history and few marketable skills beyond stocking shelves and scanning groceries. A terrible thought surfaces from the dark waters of my mind. What if they were right? What if I am nothing without being her caretaker? I press my face into the cushion, but it doesn't muffle the sob that escapes me. The following Tuesday, Sandra accompanies me to view a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat. The space smells of fabric softener and has a shower with questionable water pressure, but the rent is manageable if I pick up extra shifts. I'll co-sign, Sandra says when the landlord mentions the credit check. I stare at her. You can't, if I can't make rent, then you'll tell me, and we'll figure it out. She signs her name beside mine, a gesture so casual yet so profound I have to look away to hide my tears. That evening, as I unpack my few belongings in the tiny studio apartment, I wonder if I'm doing the right thing by keeping the truth from Hallie. Would telling her about the will only hurt her more? Or is my silence protecting the parents who failed us both? What would you do when the truth might damage the one relationship you still care about? I place the photo of Hallie and me on the windowsill, the only decoration in a room furnished with Sandra's cast-offs and thrift store finds. Outside, dusk settles over the street, people hurrying home to families and lives with foundations more secure than mine. The discovered letters remain in my backpack, evidence of a future that was never allowed to bloom. 3 days later, the phone rings for the third time today. Attorney Wallace's number flashes on the screen, persistent as a debt collector. I let it go to voicemail again. Miss Cantwell, please return my call. Hallie is struggling with the house management and bills. She needs your guidance. My thumb hovers over the delete button. Of course she's struggling. She's 17. She shouldn't have to manage a mortgage and utility bills while finishing high school. But apparently, that's what our parents wanted. The voicemail from Hallie's school counselor is worse. Miss Cantwell, I'm concerned about Hallie's academic performance. Her grades are dropping significantly, and she's missed several college application deadlines. Given your parents' emphasis on her education, I thought you should know. I press my forehead against the cool plaster wall of my tiny studio apartment. The irony burns like acid. The calls keep coming. Family friends I've known since childhood, their voices tight with judgment. How could you abandon her after everything? Mrs. Reeves asks, not bothering with hello. Your parents would be devastated. Even Pastor Miller appears at the grocery store during my shift, cornering me by the time clock. The congregation is concerned, he says, his voice low as my coworkers pretend not to listen. Family is a sacred responsibility, Nerisse. My manager, Dale, calls me into his cramped office the next day. He doesn't look at me as he shuffles papers on his desk. I'm cutting your hours, he says, until you sort out your personal problems. Customers don't need the drama. Cutting this tacket. I don't argue. What would be the point? 25 hours becomes 15, and my next paycheck won't cover rent. That night, I divide a single packet of ramen into 2 meals, saving half for tomorrow's lunch. The scale in the apartment's shared bathroom confirms what my loosening clothes have been telling me: 15 pounds gone in a month. My face in the mirror belongs to a stranger, hollowed out beneath the cheekbones. When my car breaks down timing belt, the mechanic says, $800. I start walking the 3 miles to work. In the dark, in the rain, in whatever shoes don't have holes yet. My hands, once soft from the scented lotions Mom bought me every Christmas, grow calloused from kneading dough at midnight. The small batches of cookies and muffins I sell to coworkers bring in just enough to keep the electricity on. I package them in dollar store containers, each one decorated with a handwritten note that takes more energy than I can spare. The nightmares are the worst. I watch the accident happen over and over, a scene I never witnessed in real life, constructed entirely by my subconscious. The headlights, the skid, Mom's scream, Dad's futile attempt to swerve. I wake gasping, convinced for one terrible moment that I could have prevented it somehow. My second job application goes into a file folder with the others: convenience store, call center, janitor. Anything to supplement the dwindling grocery store hours. I practice smiling in the bathroom mirror before each interview, hoping the exhaustion doesn't show. You seem overqualified, they say, which means you seem desperate. They're not wrong. The knock on my door comes early on a Sunday morning. I grab the baseball bat I keep beside the bed. This neighborhood isn't known for its safety, and approach cautiously. Mrs. Patterson stands in the hallway, a covered dish in her weathered hands. She's at least 75, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening as she smiles. Brought you something, she says, holding out the casserole. My sister's recipe. I hesitate, pride warring with hunger. I raised my sister's children after she passed. Mrs. Patterson continues, her voice matter of fact. Nobody ever asked if I was okay. She looks directly into my eyes. So I'm asking you, are you okay, dear? The simple question breaks something loose inside me. I take the casserole, hands trembling, and invite her in for coffee I can't really spare. 2 days later, Sandra texts that some mail has arrived for me at her apartment. I walk there after my shift, feet blistered but moving forward, because standing still isn't an option anymore. Sandra's apartment building comes into view, the familiar brick facade almost painful to see. A month ago, I slept on her couch, surrounded by friends who dropped by with wine and sympathy. Now she's the only one who still calls. The key she gave me turns in the lock. I push open the door and freeze. Hallie sits on the couch, hands clasped in her lap, looking both older and younger than her 17 years. Sandra, let me in, she says, her voice small. We need to talk. I set down my purse, suddenly aware of my appearance, unwashed hair, dark circles under my eyes, clothes hanging loose. You just walked away, Hallie says, her voice cracking. Like I didn't matter. The accusation slices through the last thread of my self-control. I gave up everything for you. The words erupt from someplace deep and wounded. College, career, relationships, everything. Hallie flinches as if I've struck her. Do you know what my life looks like now? I continue, tears streaming down my face. I can't afford to eat every day. I walk miles to a job where they cut my hours because I'm a problem. My car is dead. I sleep 3 hours a night between nightmares and worry. I sink onto the couch, shaking with the force of finally saying it all aloud. I love you more than anyone, Hallie, I whisper. That's why this hurts so much. She reaches for my hand, her own tears falling, and we sit in silence, broken only by the sound of shared grief. Later, as Hallie prepares to leave, Sandra slips me a business card. Bakery owner, she murmurs. Looking for an apprentice. I told her about those amazing cinnamon rolls you make. In the doorway, Mrs. Patterson appears, having somehow coordinated with Sandra. I have a spare room, she says, her tone brooking no argument. $300 a month, utilities included, until you get back on your feet. I think of the parents' friends bringing casseroles when Mom was sick years ago, of church members organizing meal trains and prayer circles. Those same people now cross the street to avoid me. Yet here are these near strangers, offering not judgment but practical help. I straighten my shoulders as I turn back to Hallie, my voice stronger than it's been in weeks. I'll meet you at the house tomorrow. I tell her, there's something you need to see. That night, I pack the discovered college letters into my bag, along with Attorney Wallace's business card. The woman looking back at me from the mirror is thin and tired, but her eyes hold something new resolve. My phone rings as I'm leaving for work the next morning. Hallie's name on the screen. I found something in the attic today, she says, her voice strange. Something about the will. Hi. I step outside into the morning light, ready at last for whatever comes next. The manila folder sits heavy in my hands as I walk up the path to what used to be my home. Maple Street glows amber in the late afternoon sun, the familiar cracked sidewalk where I taught Hallie to ride her bike stretching before me like pages from a book I've read too many times. Hallie opens the door before I knock. Her face is drawn, eyes rimmed with the soft pink of recent tears. You came, she says, stepping back to let me in. The house smells different. Not quite neglected, but changed as if it knows I don't belong here anymore. I clutch the folder tighter. I said I would. I move past her into the living room where I've spent 30 years of my life. The couch has been moved, angled toward the window instead of the television. One small rebellion. I have something to show you, I say, sitting at the dining table where our family never quite managed regular dinners together. I open the folder methodically, the way I've practiced with Sandra. Things you should know. I spread the contents like playing cards, college acceptance letters with their congratulatory language still bright despite years hidden in a box. School records showing my absences each time Hallie had been sick. Photographs Mom and Dad never displayed me holding Hallie at her kindergarten graduation while they worked. Me helping with her science projects. Me braiding her hair before school. This was my life. I say, my voice steady, though my fingers tremble slightly against the tabletop. I missed 63 days of high school my senior year because you had chronic ear infections. I deferred college 4 times. I worked part-time jobs with flexible hours so I could pick you up from school. Hallie stares at the evidence, picking up one photograph after another. I don't remember this. she whispers, holding a picture of us at the beach, her tiny hand in mine while I taught her to jump waves. You were 3. I slide a bank statement toward her. This is my current situation. I have $342 in savings. My job pays $13.25 an hour. I'm renting Mrs. Patterson's spare room for $300 a month, which leaves me about $70 a week for everything else after taxes. Her eyes widen. But what about... Mom and Dad's life insurance went to the funeral costs. There wasn't much left. I take a deep breath. I'm not telling you this to hurt you, Hallie. You deserve to know our real story, not the version they wanted everyone to believe. She's silent, tracing her finger over a photograph where I'm helping her with homework, dark circles under my teenage eyes. The doorbell rings, sharp and intrusive. Hallie jumps, but I don't... Some part of me expected this. Attorney Wallace stands on the porch, his gray suit immaculate as always. Hallie called earlier. He says, brushing past me into the house with the confidence of someone who's never been unwelcome. She was concerned about your mental state. My mental state is fine, I say, following him back to the dining room where my evidence lies scattered. He glances at the documents, dismissive. I understand this is difficult, but your parents made their wishes clear. This, he gestures at the photographs, doesn't change anything legally. Actually, Hallie says, her voice stronger than I've heard since the funeral. It might. She crosses to the small desk in the corner and pulls out a folded document from the drawer. I found this in the attic yesterday, when you mentioned meeting me here. She hands it to Wallace, whose professional mask slips for just an instant. The other will, Hallie explains to me, the one that split everything between us, dated 8 months before they died. Wallace adjusts his glasses, clears his throat. This earlier document was superseded by one written just 2 months before the accident, Hallie interrupts. With no proper witnesses, just their signatures and yours. I watch Wallace's face, the slight flush creeping up his neck. I advised against it, he admits finally. The hasty execution. But they insisted Nerys would understand. My laugh sounds hollow even to my own ears. Understand what? That after raising their child, I deserved nothing? When Hallie asks if I want to contest the will, I hesitate. Would fighting for what was rightfully mine heal the wounds or just deepen them? Should I demand justice or find a way forward that preserved the only family I had left? The front door opens again. Sandra walks in without knocking, a tall man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses following her. Tom Alvarez? Sandra introduces him. The paralegal friend I mentioned, specializes in probate law. Wallace straightens his tie. This is a private family matter. Which is why I'm here, Sandra says, sitting beside me. I'm the closest thing to family Nerys has right now. Tom examines both wills, his fingers careful on the paper. The newer version has procedural problems, he says after a few minutes. Improper execution, no disinterested witnesses, and given the circumstances. He glances at my evidence spread across the table. Mrs. Patterson appears in the doorway next, bringing with her Dr. Collins from the hospital where my parents worked. I called James, she says. He saw how your parents treated you, dear. Dr. Collins nods solemnly. They relied on Nerys completely. The hospital offered family counseling twice when we noticed the pattern. They declined. The dining room feels suddenly crowded with allies I didn't know I had. People offering solutions instead of judgment. The probate court will review this, Tom says confidently. Based on the improper execution alone, we have grounds to challenge. Wallace's phone rings. He steps into the hallway to answer, his voice low but urgent. When he returns, his expression has shifted. My office would like to discuss a settlement option, he says carefully, to spare everyone the publicity of a contested will. Sandra squeezes my hand under the table. That evening, 3 people who criticized me at the grocery store last week call to check in and offer support. The church secretary who told me I was being selfish brings a casserole to Mrs. Patterson's house where I'm staying. Hallie finds me there after dinner, clutching a leather-bound book to her chest. I found Mom's journal, she says, her voice small. You should read it. She places it in my hands, her fingers lingering on the cover. It's all about how they couldn't have managed without you, how they never wanted you to know. I open the journal as she walks away, the weight of truth finally shifting from my shoulders to the pages where it belonged all along. On the confrontation day, Attorney Wallace arrives at the community center 10 minutes early, his leather briefcase gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Margaret Jenkins, my parents' closest friend for 20 years, walks beside him, her silver cross necklace catching the light as she surveys the room. Nerisse? Wallace nods, setting his papers on the conference table with practiced precision. I've brought a compromise that should put this unfortunate situation behind us. I watch his movements, the careful arrangement of his fountain pen parallel to the edge of the document. My hands remain folded in my lap, steady now after weeks of trembling. A modest settlement, he continues, sliding a document across the polished surface. $15,000, more than fair, considering the circumstances. Margaret leans forward, her perfume, my mother's favorite, wafting between us. Your parents wanted Hallie protected, Nerisse. You know that. Her voice drops to a whisper. They worried constantly about her future. The implication hangs in the air, but never about mine. This way, Wallace adds, tapping the paper, we avoid a lengthy court battle that could deplete the estate significantly. I study the settlement offer without touching it. $15,000. The price they've placed on my 30 years of sacrifice. I understand your frustration, Margaret says, reaching for my hand. I slide mine away before she makes contact. But dragging this through the courts, making these accusations public, you're dishonoring their memory. My throat tightens as she delivers the final blow. Your parents told everyone how you promised to always care for Hallie, how you insisted on it. The door opens behind me. Hallie enters with Sandra and Tom, their footsteps breaking the silence that follows Margaret's words. I reach into my bag and remove my phone. I didn't want to do this, I say, my voice steadier than I expected, but I recorded a conversation with Mom and Dad last year. Wallace straightens, alarm flickering across his face. I press play, and my father's voice fills the room. When Hallie's grown, it'll finally be your turn, Nerisse. We promise. My mother's voice follows. You've given up so much. We'll make it right. I stop the recording and pull out a stack of yellowed notes from my mother spanning years. These are promises they made repeatedly. I place them on the table, arranging them in a neat row. Promises to help me go back to school, to support my dreams once Hallie was older. Sandra steps forward, sliding a folder toward Wallace. These are Nerisse's financial contributions to the household over the past decade. Rent payments, utility bills, groceries, all from her minimum wage jobs while the Cantwells built their careers. Tom places another document beside it. And this is documentation of the hours Nerisse spent raising Hallie while her parents worked, tracked through school pickup logs, medical forms, and parent-teacher conference attendance records. Hallie moves to stand beside me, her shoulder touching mine. We're not fighting each other, she says, her voice breaking slightly. We're fighting for the truth. Wallace examines the documents with forced neutrality, but I catch the slight widening of his eyes. I loved them, I say, gathering strength from Hallie's presence beside me. But love doesn't mean erasing myself. Not anymore. Wallace clears his throat, straightening his tie. The revised will has certain vulnerabilities. The lack of proper witnesses is problematic. 3 days later, the community center fills with familiar faces as the mediation hour approaches. People who once looked at me with disappointment now avert their eyes. A woman I recognize as a reporter from the local paper sits in the corner, notebook ready. Hallie and I walk in together, our shoulders brushing. We take seats at the front table, facing the mediator, a stern woman with kind eyes. Before we begin, I say, opening my folder, I'd like to present an alternative solution. The mediator nods, and I continue, laying out documents Tom helped prepare. We're proposing legal co-ownership of the house and all assets. I explain. Equal division, equal responsibility. A murmur ripples through the room. The reporter's pen scratches rapidly against paper. Hallie sits straighter beside me. My sister sacrificed everything for me. Her voice carries through the room. She was more of a parent to me than they were. Margaret makes a small noise of protest, beginning to rise from her chair. Please let my sister finish, Hallie says, the steel in her voice silencing the older woman immediately. The room grows quiet. People who once shook their heads at me in the grocery store now lean forward, listening. The pastor who suggested I was abandoning my duty now watches with troubled eyes. I speak clearly. My voice neither accusatory nor defensive, just matter of fact. I describe the college opportunities hidden from me, the late nights caring for Hallie, the promises made and broken. I explain how my parents built their reputations as devoted community members, while I maintained their home and raised their child. When I finish, the mediator reviews our proposal silently. The room remains hushed, the only sound the steady tick of the wall clock, so different from the hammering timepiece in Wallace's office. 3 weeks later, I stand on the courthouse steps as the clerk hands me the final paperwork. The court has approved our joint petition to invalidate the contested will, reverting to the previous version that divided everything equally between Hallie and me. There's talk? Sandra tells me later over coffee. People are questioning everything they thought they knew about your parents. I nod, unsurprised. Community pillars can crumble quickly when their foundations are revealed to be built on someone else's sacrifice. Have you decided? Hallie asks that evening as we sort through kitchen cabinets. About moving back? I run my fingers along the familiar countertop where I taught her to bake cookies, where I helped with science projects, where I prepared countless meals while my parents worked late. I don't know yet. I admit. Hallie disappears upstairs, returning moments later with a dusty cardboard box. The label, written in my teenage handwriting, reads, Narice's Dreams. I found this in the attic, she says, placing it gently before me. I think it's time to open it again. Morning sunlight streams through the bakery windows, catching the flour dust dancing in the air as I fold melted butter into pastry dough. Mr. Donovan nods approvingly at my technique. You've got a natural talent, Narice. These will sell out before noon. I smile, allowing myself to savor the compliment rather than deflecting it. 6 months of apprenticeship have taught me more than just baking. They've taught me to recognize my own worth. Later, as I pipe rosettes onto a birthday cake, my phone buzzes with Hallie's text. Financial meeting still on for tonight? I respond with a thumbs-up emoji. Our weekly budget sessions have become a ritual, me teaching Hallie to manage the rental income from the upstairs apartment, her teaching me to stop hovering over every decision she makes. The money isn't much, but it's enough to supplement my bakery wages while allowing Hallie to focus on her senior year without working full-time. Back home, I tape my class schedule to the refrigerator door, right where our parents' rules and expectations once hung. Business management on Tuesdays and Thursdays, entrepreneurship on Wednesdays. The scholarship isn't full, but it's enough. I trace my finger over the neat rows of times and dates, concrete evidence of promises I've finally kept to myself. Your transcript came today, Hallie announces, waving an envelope as she walks into the kitchen, and I finished my essay for Northwestern. I wash flour from my hands, my stomach tightening with an old, familiar anxiety. College applications. The season of waiting, hoping, planning that I never experienced for myself. Want me to look it over? I ask, careful to keep my tone light. Please, but only if you have time. Hallie spreads her essay on the kitchen table. The interview's next week. I sit beside her, but not before grabbing my planner. I can help tonight, but I've got study group tomorrow, and Saturday is that bakery showcase. The words feel foreign but wonderful in my mouth boundaries, clearly stated. Not apologies disguised as explanations. I know your schedule, Hallie says, rolling her eyes but smiling. I'm not expecting you to drop everything. I'm not mom and dad. We work through her essay, side by side in the kitchen, where I once cut her sandwiches into stars because the extra effort made her eat when nothing else would. Same situation, different approach. I'm here because I choose to be, not because I have to be. Later that week, Sandra and Tom arrive early for the bakery showcase, helping me arrange display stands for my signature lavender shortbread and lemon tarts. Mrs. Patterson brings a handmade sign, Nini's Treats. Using the nickname only Hallie was allowed to call me as a child. To family we choose and boundaries we respect. Tom toasts with sparkling cider, his arm around Sandra's waist. Our neighbors from down the street, the ones who know our real story, not our parents' version, clap and cheer as Mr. Donovan announces my promotion to assistant baker. The following week after the showcase, on Sunday, Hallie holds the ladder steady, while I hang the sign above our renovated garage, Nini's Table Baked with Love. Below it, a smaller plaque reads, Est, 2025 Ampere Cantwell Sisters Venture. You still sure about me working weekends when I'm home from college? Hallie asks, squinting up at me. The business plan accounts for it, I answer, climbing down. Besides, The rental income covers most of your tuition. I stand back to admire our work, the converted garage that will become my first professional kitchen once I complete my degree next year. The sound of Hallie's laughter drifts across the yard as she texts photos to Sandra and Tom. As I put the finishing touches on my first professional kitchen, I wonder, is forgiveness always necessary for healing? Can we honor the complicated truth of those we've lost while still protecting our own hearts? What would you choose? The comfort of a simpler story or the freedom of an honest one?